entitled parents teacher called me just a babysitter, so I exposed her lies. Excuse me, but you're not listed as a parent or guardian. I only discuss Emma's progress with actual family members, not babysitters. Mrs. Henderson's voice dripped with condescension as she glanced at the other parents waiting behind me in the elementary school hallway. The way she said babysitters made it sound like I was some random teenager who occasionally watched TV while their kid ran wild. My face burned as whispers started behind me. I clutched Emma's folder tighter, the one filled with her artwork, homework sheets I'd helped her with, and notes about her nightmares that had been keeping us both up. I'm Emma's nanny, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mr. and Mrs. Williams are in Tokyo on business. They specifically asked me to attend this conference, Anne. A nanny, a babysitter, what's the difference? Mrs. Henderson waved her hand dismissively. You're not her parent. I have actual families to speak with. The other parents were definitely staring now. One mom I recognized from pickup whispered something to her husband, and they both looked at me with that mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment that made my stomach twist. But Emma's been having problems, I pressed on, my voice getting smaller despite my efforts. She's been acting out at home, crying after school, saying she doesn't want to come here anymore. Something's wrong, and I need to understand what's happening in your classroom so I can help her. Mrs. Henderson's smile was arctic. I'm sure it's nothing a little structure and discipline can't fix. Perhaps the Williams family should consider more professional childcare arrangements. That hit like a slap. Professional. I'd been with Emma for 8 months. I knew she was afraid of thunderstorms and loved strawberry pancakes cut into star shapes. I knew she was struggling with reading but excelled at math. I knew her parents worked 18-hour days and I was often the only adult who really listened to her. I have legal authorization from her parents, I said, pulling out the notarized letter Mrs. Williams had insisted I carry everywhere. I'm authorized to make medical decisions, pick her up from school, attend conferences. Legal paperwork doesn't make you family, sweetie. Mrs. Henderson's tone was the kind you'd use on a particularly slow child. Emma needs consistency, not a revolving door of college students playing house. The hallway felt like it was closing in. Other parents were openly staring now, probably wondering what drama they'd stumbled into. My cheeks were on fire, and I could feel that horrible prickle behind my eyes that meant tears were coming. But then I thought about Emma yesterday, sobbing into my shoulder after I picked her up from school. Mrs. Henderson yelled at me in front of everyone, she'd whispered. She said I was being disruptive, but I was just asking Tommy if he was okay because he looked sad. I thought about how Emma's previously neat handwriting had gotten shaky and rushed. How she'd started having stomach aches every morning before school. How she'd asked me last week if some kids were just bad at being good. Something was very wrong in Mrs. Henderson's classroom, and this woman was stonewalling me because of my age and job title. Fine, I said, my voice steadier now. I'll be sure to let Mr. and Mrs. Williams know how helpful you've been. Mrs. Henderson's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. Have a lovely day, dear. As I walked away, I was already planning my next move. I made it to my car before the tears of humiliation started, but I wiped them away quickly. Emma would be getting out of school in 20 minutes, and I refused to let her see me upset. That kid had enough on her plate without worrying about me too. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my roommate. How'd the conference go? Did you get answers about Emma's school stuff? I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. How could I explain that I'd been dismissed like some random teenager? That Mrs. Henderson had basically called me incompetent in front of a hallway full of actual parents. Complicated. Tell you later, I typed back. But as I sat there in the school parking lot, watching other parents emerge from their successful conferences with folders full of their children's work and actual information about their progress, something shifted in my chest. The embarrassment was still there, burning hot and shameful, but underneath it was something harder. Something angrier. Mrs. Henderson had judged me based on my age and job title, sure. That stung. But she'd also completely dismissed Emma's problems like they didn't matter. Like the nightmares and tears and stomach aches were just inconveniences to be brushed aside. I pulled out my phone and called Mrs. Williams. It was early morning in Tokyo, but she told me to call if anything important came up. Maya. How did the conference go? Her voice was slightly distorted by the international connection, but I could hear the concern. Not well, I said, then explained the whole humiliating encounter. Mrs. Williams was silent for a long moment. She said what? Her voice had gone dangerously quiet. Mrs. Williams was normally soft-spoken, but I'd seen her negotiate million-dollar deals. That tone meant someone was about to have a very bad day. She wouldn't discuss Emma's behavioral issues at all. Just dismissed everything as needing more structure and discipline. She basically implied you should fire me and get professional childcare. Over my dead body. Mrs. Williams's voice was sharp now. Maya, you're practically Emma's big sister. You know her better than anyone except David and me. This is absolutely unacceptable. I have that authorization letter you gave me. Which should have been sufficient. I'm calling the principal right now. No, actually, I'm calling the superintendent. This is discrimination, plain and simple. I felt a rush of gratitude, but also worry. Mrs. Williams, I don't want to cause problems for Emma at school. If Mrs. Henderson gets in trouble because of me. Then what? She takes it out on Emma. Mrs. Williams finished my thought. You're right to be concerned. Teachers like that, they don't like being challenged. My stomach dropped. I hadn't thought about potential retaliation, but now it seemed obvious. If Mrs. Henderson was already treating Emma poorly and I got her boss involved. What should we do? I asked. Let me handle the official complaint. But Maya, I need you to start documenting everything. Every conversation with Emma about school, every incident she mentions, every change in her behavior. We're going to need evidence that this teacher is the problem, not our daughter. As if summoned by our conversation, Emma appeared at the school's front doors, her little backpack dragging behind her instead of properly worn. Her shoulders were slumped, and even from across the parking lot, I could see she looked defeated. I have to go, I told Mrs. Williams. Emma's coming. Give her extra hugs from me. And Maya. Thank you for fighting for her. You're exactly the kind of advocate she needs. As I hung up and got out to greet Emma, I made a silent promise to myself. Mrs. Henderson wanted to treat me like just some clueless babysitter. Fine. She had no idea what this babysitter was capable of. Emma climbed into the back seat, and I immediately knew something else had happened. How was your day, sweetheart? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a small voice, Mrs. Henderson said you came to visit her today. My blood ran cold. She mentioned that to you. She said some people don't know their place. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as Emma's words hit me like ice water. She said what? During math time, Emma continued in that heartbreakingly small voice. She said some people don't know their place, and that grown-ups have important jobs that children and other people shouldn't interfere with. I pulled into our driveway, my mind racing. The vindictive witch had actually brought our confrontation into the classroom. In front of Emma. In front of all the other kids. Emma, honey, did she say anything else? I tried to keep my voice gentle, but rage was building in my chest like a pressure cooker. She kept looking at me when she said it. And then when I dropped my pencil, she got really mad and said I was being disruptive again. But I wasn't. It just fell. Emma's voice cracked, and I could see tears starting in the rearview mirror. I parked and turned around to face her. Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You did nothing wrong, okay? Nothing. Mrs. Henderson was upset about something completely separate from you, and she was wrong to bring it into your classroom. But even as I comforted her, my mind was spinning with the implications. Mrs. Henderson wasn't just dismissive or condescending, she was actively taking her anger at me out on an 8-year-old child. This was worse than I'd thought. We went inside, and I helped Emma with her snack and homework, but I could tell she was distracted. She kept glancing at me with those worried eyes, like she was trying to figure out if she'd gotten me in trouble somehow. Maya, she said quietly as we worked on her spelling words. Are you going to get fired because you talked to Mrs. Henderson? My heart broke a little more. No, sweetheart. Your parents asked me to go to that meeting. I was doing exactly what I was supposed to do. But Emma's question planted a seed of doubt. What if Mrs. Henderson called the Williams family directly? What if she spun this whole thing to make me look like an overstepping employee who couldn't respect boundaries? The Williamses trusted me, but Mrs. Henderson was an authority figure, a teacher with years of experience. If she painted me as some rebellious teenager causing problems. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi Maya. This is Jennifer Chin, Tommy's mom. I was at the school today and saw what happened with Mrs. Henderson. Could we talk? Tommy, Emma had mentioned a Tommy yesterday. The sad kid she tried to comfort before getting yelled at. I texted back, hi Jennifer. Yes, I'd like to talk. Is everything okay? Can I call you? It's about Mrs. Henderson. My son has been having problems too, and after seeing how she treated you today. I think there's something you should know. My pulse quickened. I stepped into the kitchen where Emma couldn't hear and called Jennifer. Maya, thank you for calling back. Jennifer's voice was urgent. Look, what I saw today was completely unprofessional. But it's not the first time I've seen Mrs. Henderson be difficult. What do you mean? Tommy's been coming home with stories about her yelling at kids, playing favorites, making students stand in the corner for things like asking questions. But when I tried to discuss it with her last month, she made me feel like I was being an overprotective helicopter parent. My stomach sank. She dismissed your concerns too. Completely. Said Tommy was being sensitive and needed to toughen up. But Maya, the way she treated you today, refusing to discuss Emma's issues, embarrassing you in front of everyone, that wasn't about protecting student privacy. That was about control. Have you talked to other parents? A few. Quietly. Most are afraid to say anything because she's been at that school for 12 years. She has seniority, connections. Parents worry that complaining will make things worse for their kids. Just like I was worrying. But now I was realizing that staying quiet might be worse than speaking up. Jennifer, Emma said Mrs. Henderson made comments in class today about our meeting. She basically humiliated Emma because she was angry at me. The silence on the other end was telling. Finally, we need to document everything, Maya. This woman is out of control. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to details I'd previously overlooked, and what I discovered made my stomach turn. Emma's daily stories about school, which I'd initially chalked up to normal 8-year-old drama, began forming a disturbing pattern. Mrs. Henderson had a seating chart that seemed designed to isolate certain kids. Emma, Tommy, and a few others were stuck in the back corner, away from the good students. She had a point system that appeared completely arbitrary, where some kids got rewards for breathing while others got deductions for sneezing. She gave Marcus a sticker for answering a question wrong, Emma told me on Wednesday, but when I knew the right answer and raised my hand, she said I should let other people have a turn. But then she never called on me again. I started writing everything down, just like Mrs. Williams had suggested. By Thursday, I had 3 pages of incidents, and a horrifying picture was emerging of a teacher who was either completely incompetent or deliberately targeting certain students. But then Jennifer called with news that made everything more complicated. Maya, I found out why Mrs. Henderson dismissed you so rudely, she said, her voice tight with anger. I was talking to Rebecca Martinez, her son is in a class too, and apparently Mrs. Henderson's been telling other teachers that the Williams family is typical rich people who think money can solve everything. What does that have to do with me? She's been saying that hiring a nanny instead of raising their own child is neglectful, and that Emma's behavioral problems are because her parents dump her on hired help instead of providing real parental guidance. My face burned with humiliation and rage. She's been gossiping about our family. It gets worse. Rebecca heard from the art teacher that Mrs. Henderson said you probably don't even have any childcare qualifications, and that rich families just hire college students because they're cheap, not because they're competent. I sank onto my couch, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Not only was Mrs. Henderson treating Emma unfairly, she was spreading rumors about the Williams family and undermining my reputation throughout the school. There's more, Jennifer continued reluctantly. Apparently she's friends with the school secretary, and they've been discussing whether the administration should require background checks for anyone picking up students, specifically mentioning your situation. But I already have background checks. Mrs. Williams made sure everything was completely legal and proper. I know that, but Mrs. Henderson is spinning it like the school has no oversight over who parents send to conferences and events. She's making it sound like a safety issue. This was spiraling out of control. What had started as one teacher's condescending attitude was turning into a full-scale attack on my character and the Williams family's parenting choices. My phone rang, Mrs. Williams calling from Tokyo. Maya, we have a problem, she said without preamble. I just got off the phone with Principal Martinez. Apparently, there's been a concern raised about Emma's home situation and whether her behavioral issues stem from inconsistent care providers. My heart sank. Mrs. Henderson called the principal. Not directly. But somehow the administration got the impression that Emma's problems might be related to having a nanny instead of direct parental supervision. They're requesting a meeting when David and I return next week. Mrs. Williams, I swear I haven't done anything wrong. I know that. But Maya, this teacher is playing dirty. She's not just dismissing your concerns about Emma, she's actively trying to undermine our family structure and your position in it. As I hung up, I realized Mrs. Henderson hadn't just humiliated me in that hallway. She declared war. The meeting with Principal Martinez was scheduled for Monday morning, and by Friday afternoon, I was a nervous wreck. Mrs. Williams had assured me repeatedly that they trusted me completely, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything I'd worked for with Emma was about to crumble because of Mrs. Henderson's vindictive campaign. That's when Jennifer called with information that changed everything. Maya, you need to sit down for this, she said, her voice barely containing excitement. I've been doing some digging into Mrs. Henderson's classroom management, and I found something big. I was helping Emma with her Friday homework packet, math problems that were suspiciously more difficult than anything they'd covered in class, which I was now realizing might be another red flag. What did you find? I asked, stepping into the kitchen. Do you remember how Emma said Mrs. Henderson has that point system? The one where some kids get rewards and others get punishments for the same behaviors? Yeah, it seemed really arbitrary and unfair. It's not arbitrary, Maya. It's systematic. I talked to 5 other parents this week, and there's a clear pattern. The kids who get punished and isolated. They're all from families Mrs. Henderson apparently disapproves of. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Tommy's parents are divorced, and his mom works 2 jobs. Sarah Chen's parents don't speak English as their first language. Marcus is being raised by his grandmother. Emma's parents both work and have a nanny. Every single kid in that back corner represents some family structure that doesn't meet Mrs. Henderson's traditional expectations. I felt sick. That's discrimination. It gets worse. Rebecca Martinez's sister works in the front office, and she overheard Mrs. Henderson talking to another teacher about problem families who don't prioritize their children properly. She specifically mentioned that working mothers and alternative care arrangements create behavioral issues in kids. She's targeting students based on their family situations. My voice was getting louder, and I saw Emma look up from her homework with concern. That's exactly what she's doing. And Maya, there's something else. I asked my neighbor who's a teacher at the middle school, and she said there've been whispers about Mrs. Henderson for years. Parents complain, but nothing ever sticks because she's careful about how she phrases things, and she has allies in the administration. I walked into the living room where Emma was struggling with a math worksheet that looked like it belonged in a 4th grade classroom, not 2nd grade. Emma, sweetheart, are these problems from today's lesson? She shook her head, looking defeated. Mrs. Henderson said some of us need extra practice because we don't get enough help at home with our learning. There it was. Another dig at families like ours, disguised as educational concern. Which kids got this extra worksheet? I asked gently. Me, Tommy, Sarah, Marcus, and Aiden. She counted on her fingers. Mrs. Henderson said our parents probably don't have time to help us, so we need to work harder by ourselves. I looked at the problems again. These weren't just challenging, they were deliberately designed to frustrate and discourage. Problems that required skills they hadn't learned yet, word problems with vocabulary beyond their grade level. Did everyone else get different homework? Emma nodded sadly. Jessica and Hannah got a coloring sheet with easy math facts. Mrs. Henderson said they earned a reward for being good students. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and took pictures of Emma's worksheet. Then I called Jennifer back. She's giving the targeted kids impossible homework while rewarding her favorites with easy busy work, I told her. This isn't just unfair, it's educational sabotage. Maya, we need to move fast. Rebecca's sister says Mrs. Henderson has been building a case that Emma's behavioral problems are escalating, and she's planning to recommend Emma be evaluated for learning disabilities or behavioral disorders. What? Emma doesn't have learning disabilities. We know that, but if Mrs. Henderson documents enough incidents and academic struggles, she can make a case that Emma needs special services, which would reflect poorly on your care and her parents' involvement. I felt the walls closing in. Mrs. Henderson wasn't just trying to humiliate me or undermine the Williams family, she was actively sabotaging Emma's academic record to prove her point about problem families. There's a school board meeting Tuesday night, Jennifer continued. If we're going to stop this, we need to present evidence before she can do any more damage to these kids. As I hung up, Emma appeared beside me with tears in her eyes, holding her impossible math worksheet. Maya, I can't do these problems. I'm too stupid. That's when I knew Mrs. Henderson had crossed a line there was no coming back from. I knelt down to Emma's eye level, my heart breaking at her defeated expression. You are not stupid, Emma. Not even close. These math problems are meant for kids who are much older than you. But Mrs. Henderson said. Mrs. Henderson is wrong. The words came out sharper than I intended, and Emma's eyes widened. I took a breath and softened my voice. Sweetheart, you're one of the smartest kids I know. These problems are unfair, and that's not your fault. As I helped Emma with age-appropriate versions of the problems, my phone kept buzzing with texts from Jennifer. She'd been busy. Maya, talk to the art teacher. Mrs. H has been telling staff that Emma is attention-seeking and disruptive. Art teacher says Emma is always quiet and well-behaved in her class. More news, the librarian says Mrs. H told her Emma might need intervention for behavioral issues. Librarian was confused because Emma loves reading time and never causes problems. Important, Rebecca's sister found out Mrs. H is meeting with the school counselor Monday morning before your meeting with the principal. She's presenting documentation about Emma. My stomach dropped. Mrs. Henderson was moving faster than we were. By Monday, she'd have an official file full of her manufactured incidents and academic concerns presented to the counselor and principal before the Williams family even had a chance to defend themselves. I called Mrs. Williams immediately, even though it was late in Tokyo. She's building a false case against Emma, I explained, pacing around the kitchen while Emma colored in the living room. Fake behavioral reports, impossible homework designed to make her fail, and now she's involving the school counselor. That manipulative, Mrs. Williams caught herself. Maya, David, and I are flying back tomorrow instead of Monday. This ends now. But your meetings can wait. No one attacks our daughter. Her voice had gone ice cold. I'm also calling our lawyer. If this teacher thinks she can fabricate evidence against an 8-year-old to cover her own prejudice, she's about to learn otherwise. After Emma went to bed, I sat at my laptop and started organizing everything Jennifer and I had discovered. The pattern was even clearer when I laid it all out. Mrs. Henderson systematically targeted children from non-traditional families, gave them harder work, punished them more severely, and then used their resulting struggles as evidence that their home situations were inadequate. But as I typed up my notes, a new worry crept in. Mrs. Henderson had 12 years at this school, relationships with staff, and experience manipulating situations to her advantage. Meanwhile, I was 19 years old with less than a year of childcare experience. Who would the administration believe? My phone rang at 11 p.m. Jennifer's voice was urgent. Maya, emergency. I just got off the phone with Sarah Chen's mom. Mrs. Henderson called her tonight. Called her. About what? She told Mrs. Chen that she was concerned about the group of parents who've been gossiping about her teaching methods. She said that spreading rumors could be considered harassment, and that she hoped Mrs. Chen would reconsider participating in unfounded complaints. My blood ran cold. She's threatening the other parents. It gets worse. She specifically mentioned that she knew Mrs. Chen had been talking to Emma's babysitter, and that involving non-family members in school disputes was inappropriate and potentially violating confidentiality policies. She's trying to isolate me from the other parents. The pieces click together. If she can make them afraid to support me, then it's just my word against hers. Mrs. Chen is scared, Maya. She's worried that if she speaks up, Mrs. Henderson will take it out on Sarah. And honestly, after seeing what she's done to Emma, that's not an unreasonable fear. I sank onto my couch, feeling overwhelmed. Mrs. Henderson wasn't just fighting dirty, she was systematically dismantling any support network we'd built. By Monday morning, she'd have official documentation, frightened parents, and administrative backing for her narrative that I was an overstepping employee and Emma was a troubled child from a negligent family. Jennifer, are you backing out too? I asked quietly. Hell no. But Maya, we need something concrete. Something she can't explain away or spin as misinterpretation. Right now, everything we have could be dismissed as personality conflicts or different teaching philosophies. As I hung up, I stared at Emma's impossible homework worksheet lying on my coffee table. Mrs. Henderson had gotten away with this pattern for years because she was careful, manipulative, and smart about covering her tracks. But everyone makes mistakes when they're angry. And Mrs. Henderson was definitely angry at me. If I was going to protect Emma and expose the truth, I needed to catch Mrs. Henderson in the act of being exactly who she really was. And I was running out of time to do it. The weekend dragged by in a haze of anxiety and planning. Mrs. Williams and her husband were flying back Sunday night, which meant I had less than 48 hours to gather any additional evidence before Monday's showdown with the principal. Emma could sense something was wrong. She kept asking if she was in trouble, if her parents were mad at her, if she had to change schools. Am I a bad kid, Maya? She asked Saturday morning over breakfast, her voice so small it broke my heart. You are the best kid, I told her firmly. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about things that have nothing to do with you being good or bad. This is one of those times. But even as I reassured her, I was spiraling internally. What if Mrs. Henderson's documentation was convincing? What if the principal decided the easiest solution was to transfer Emma to another class, or worse, suggest she needed special services she didn't actually need? What if the Williams family, despite their support, started wondering if maybe I really was too young and inexperienced for this job? Saturday afternoon brought another curveball. My phone rang with yet another unknown number. Is this Maya? The voice was hesitant, nervous. This is Linda Rodriguez. My daughter Sophia was in Mrs. Henderson's class 2 years ago. My pulse quickened. Hi Linda. How did you get my number? Jennifer Chen gave it to me. She said you're dealing with Mrs. Henderson's behavior. Maya, I should have spoken up years ago, but I was afraid. After hearing what's happening to your little girl, I can't stay quiet anymore. What happened with Sophia? The same pattern you're seeing now. Sophia's father and I work opposite shifts. I'm a night nurse, he's a day construction worker, so our schedules were complicated. Mrs. Henderson decided that meant Sophia wasn't getting proper support at home. I grabbed a notebook, my hands shaking slightly. What did she do? Started with impossible homework, just like what you described. Then she began documenting every little thing. If Sophia yawned, she was tired due to inadequate sleep routines at home. If she asked for help, she was overly dependent due to inconsistent parenting. If she didn't ask for help, she was withdrawn and possibly neglected. That's exactly what she's doing to Emma, I whispered. It escalated to the point where Mrs. Henderson recommended Sophia for psychological evaluation. She claimed Sophia had behavioral issues and learning delays that required intervention. We spent 6 months and thousands of dollars on specialists, only to find out Sophia was perfectly normal. She was just stressed and anxious from being targeted at school. My stomach lurched. What happened to Mrs. Henderson? Nothing. The administration said it was a misunderstanding, and that Mrs. Henderson was just being thorough in her concerns for student welfare. They moved Sophia to a different class, but by then the damage was done. Sophia spent the rest of elementary school thinking she was broken. Linda, would you be willing to talk to the principal? To tell them about this pattern? There was a long pause. Maya, that's why I'm calling. Sophia's in middle school now, but she still has anxiety about authority figures. If speaking up can prevent another child from going through what she did, yes. I'll do it. After we hung up, I immediately called Jennifer to share this development. Having a parent with a documented history of Mrs. Henderson's behavior from previous years would be crucial evidence. But Jennifer's response wasn't what I expected. Maya, there's something I need to tell you. I just got a call from the principal's office. Mrs. Henderson filed a formal complaint against you. My blood turned to ice. What kind of complaint? Harassment and interference with educational processes. She's claiming you've been organizing other parents to make false accusations against her, and that you've been coaching students to lie about classroom incidents. The room spun around me. That's completely untrue. I know that, but Maya, they want to meet with you tomorrow morning. Before the Williams family arrives. They're considering banning you from school property pending an investigation. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the implications. If I was banned from the school, I couldn't advocate for Emma. I couldn't attend meetings or conferences. Mrs. Henderson would have successfully isolated me from any ability to protect the child I'd come to love like my own little sister. Jennifer, she's checkmated us. By Monday morning, she'll have me painted as a troublemaking employee who manipulated parents into attacking her, Emma documented as a problem child from a dysfunctional family, and herself positioned as the victim of harassment. Not necessarily, Jennifer said, her voice taking on a determined edge. Maya, what time does Emma's class start Monday morning? 8:15. Why? I think it's time Mrs. Henderson showed everyone exactly who she really is. What do you mean? I asked Jennifer, though something in her tone made my pulse quicken. Mrs. Henderson thinks she's untouchable because she's careful about what she says around other adults. But Maya, she's gotten sloppy with you. She's angry, and angry people make mistakes. I was pacing around my apartment now, my mind racing. Jennifer, I can't record her without consent, that's illegal. And even if I could, she's not going to confess to targeting kids in casual conversation. I'm not talking about recording. I'm talking about witnesses. Real ones. What do you mean? Think about it, Mrs. Henderson has been spreading rumors about you to other teachers, right? Talking about the Williams family, making comments about Emma's home situation. She thinks those conversations are private, but schools are gossip mills. Other staff members have heard things. My heart started beating faster. You think someone would come forward? I think someone already wants to. Maya, Rebecca's sister isn't the only office worker who's uncomfortable with what they've been hearing. There's a whole support staff at that school, teachers' aides, custodians, lunch supervisors, and they see everything. But would they risk their jobs to help us? For the right cause? Maybe. But Maya, there's something else. Something I haven't told you yet. I stopped pacing. What? Mrs. Henderson made a mistake on Friday. A big one. She was in the office after school, talking to the secretary about your meeting with the principal on Monday. She didn't realize the intercom system was still on. My breath caught. What did she say? Rebecca's sister heard the whole thing. Mrs. Henderson was bragging about how she was going to put that girl in her place and make sure people like her understand they can't interfere with real educators. She said she'd been documenting Emma's issues for weeks specifically to build a case against your competence. She admitted to targeting Emma. More than that. She said the Williams family represents everything wrong with modern parenting, and that she was doing them a favor by showing them their hired help couldn't replace actual involvement. Maya, she basically confessed to manufacturing a case against an 8-year-old to prove an ideological point. I felt dizzy with a mixture of vindication and terror. Who else heard this? Just Rebecca's sister and one other office worker. But Maya, here's the problem, Rebecca's sister is scared to come forward because the secretary Mrs. Henderson was talking to is her supervisor. She could lose her job. So we still don't have anyone willing to testify. Not yet. But I have an idea. It's risky, and you might not like it. I sat down heavily on my couch. At this point, Jennifer, I'm willing to consider anything. My meeting with the principal is in 14 hours, and after that, I might not be allowed back on school grounds. What if Mrs. Henderson said those things again? In front of witnesses who couldn't be fired or intimidated. What do you mean? Parent volunteers help in classrooms every Monday morning. Art projects, reading groups, that kind of thing. Mrs. Henderson always acts differently when parents are around, but what if she thought she was talking privately to a friendly parent? Someone she trusted. My stomach dropped. Jennifer, no. I can't ask you to trick her into. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Maya, this woman is destroying children to feed her own prejudices. Sophia Rodriguez, Emma, Tommy, who knows how many others over the years. Someone has to catch her showing her true colors. But what if she doesn't take the bait? What if she's too careful? She won't be able to help herself. You said it yourself, she's angry. And there's something about you specifically that's triggered her beyond rational behavior. If I mention you, mention the meeting, act sympathetic to her position. She'll start talking. I close my eyes, trying to think through all the ways this could go wrong. Jennifer, if this backfires, she'll know we were working together. She'll use it as proof that we really are harassing her. Then we better make sure it doesn't backfire. As we finalized our desperate plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to cross a line that would change everything. Tomorrow morning, Mrs. Henderson would either finally reveal herself for what she really was, or she'd destroy any credibility I had left. Either way, by Monday afternoon, this war would be over. Sunday night was the longest night of my life. Mrs. Williams texted me at 2 a.m. from the plane, landing in 3 hours. Lawyer meeting US at school. Stay strong, Maya. We've got your back. But lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jennifer's plan was going to blow up in our faces. What if Mrs. Henderson suspected something? What if she was too careful around other parents? What if we were walking into a trap? At 6 a.m., my phone exploded with notifications. Jennifer, emergency. Plan changed. Mrs. Henderson called in sick today. My heart plummeted. After all this build-up, all this planning, she wasn't even going to be there. Then another text, wait, update. Rebecca's sister says she's not actually sick. She's meeting with the principal and superintendent early to discuss your harassment campaign before you arrive. I bolted upright. She was making her move before I even had a chance to defend myself. Another message from Jennifer, Linda Rodriguez is already at the school. She brought documentation from Sophia's case. Maya, you need to get there now. I threw on clothes and raced to school, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The early morning parking lot was nearly empty except for a few administrative cars and one familiar SUV. Mrs. Williams was here. Inside, I found Linda Rodriguez sitting in the hallway outside the principal's office, clutching a manila folder. She looked as nervous as I felt. Maya. The secretary said Mrs. Henderson has been in there for 45 minutes. She brought boxes of documentation. My stomach dropped. Boxes. While we had a few witness statements and homework sheets, she had boxes of manufactured evidence. Linda, maybe you should leave. If this goes badly dash. Absolutely not. Sophia still has nightmares about second grade. I should have fought this battle years ago. The principal's office door opened, and Mrs. Henderson emerged looking smugly satisfied. When she saw me sitting there, her expression shifted to something almost predatory. Maya, dear, she said in that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. I'm surprised to see you here so early. Though I suppose after our meeting, you won't need to worry about school schedules anymore. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, though her satisfied smirk told me everything. Oh, you'll find out soon enough. I just hope the Williams family finds more suitable arrangements for Emma. She really does deserve consistency. The way she said suitable made my skin crawl. But then I noticed something. Linda Rodriguez was recording on her phone, held low beside her chair. Mrs. Henderson was so focused on intimidating me that she hadn't noticed. Actually, Mrs. Henderson, Linda spoke up, her voice steady despite her obvious nerves. I was hoping to speak with you about Emma's situation. Mrs. Henderson turned, clearly not recognizing Linda immediately. I'm sorry, are you a parent in my class? My daughter Sophia was in your class 2 years ago. I've been hearing some concerning things about how you handle certain students. Mrs. Henderson's expression hardened. I'm sorry, but I don't discuss my professional methods with former parents. Especially when they've clearly been influenced by troublemakers spreading malicious gossip. She glanced pointedly at me, and Linda's phone captured every word. Troublemakers? Linda pressed. You mean parents who are concerned about their children? I mean people who don't understand their place in the educational system, Mrs. Henderson snapped, her composure finally cracking. Some individuals think that because they're paid to watch children, they have the same authority as actual educators and parents. The principal's door opened again, and Mr. Martinez appeared with Mrs. Williams right behind him. They'd heard everything. Mrs. Henderson's face went white as she realized what had just happened. Her moment of vindictive satisfaction had just become her confession. And Linda Rodriguez had captured every damning word. The silence in that hallway was deafening. Mrs. Henderson's face had gone from smug satisfaction to pure panic in the span of seconds, and I could practically see her brain scrambling for damage control. Mr. Martinez, she said, her voice artificially bright, I was just explaining to these individuals that we should let the proper authorities handle Emma's situation. But Mrs. Williams stepped forward, and I recognized the expression on her face. It was the same ice-cold look she got during hostile business negotiations, the one that meant someone was about to get professionally destroyed. Proper authorities. Mrs. Williams's voice was dangerously quiet. You mean like the authorities you've been feeding manufactured evidence to for weeks? I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Mrs. Henderson replied, but her voice wavered. Linda Rodriguez stood up, still recording, her phone now visible. I think you know exactly what she means. The same way you manufactured evidence against my daughter Sophia 2 years ago. Mrs. Henderson's eyes darted to the phone, then to Mr. Martinez, then back to me with pure hatred. This is harassment. They're ganging up on me with some coordinated attack. The only coordination here, Mrs. Williams interrupted, is your systematic targeting of children whose families don't meet your personal standards. Mr. Martinez looked deeply uncomfortable, glancing between all of us. Perhaps we should take this conversation into my office. No, Mrs. Williams said firmly. I think we've had enough private conversations. Mrs. Henderson has been building her case against my family in private meetings for weeks. It's time for some transparency. That's when Jennifer appeared at the end of the hallway with 2 people I didn't recognize, a woman in her 40s and a man with graying hair. Sorry I'm late, Jennifer called out, her voice echoing in the empty corridor. I brought the Chin family. They have some things to share about their daughter Sarah's experience. Mrs. Henderson's face went from pale to green. This is ridiculous. You people are staging some kind of ambush. We're protecting our children, the woman with Jennifer said loudly. Something that's apparently your job, but you've been too busy playing favorites and targeting kids whose families you disapprove of. I have never, Mrs. Henderson started, but the man cut her off. My daughter comes home crying 3 times a week because you single her out for having divorced parents. You think we don't notice the different homework sheets? The way you group certain kids together in the back of the room? More footsteps echoed down the hallway. Other parents were arriving for the regular Monday morning volunteer schedule, and they were all staring at the confrontation unfolding outside the principal's office. Mrs. Henderson was trapped. Parents she'd intimidated individually were now standing together, and her careful web of isolation was unraveling in real time. But cornered animals are dangerous, and I could see desperation making her reckless. Fine, she snapped, her professional mask finally slipping completely. You want the truth. These children are struggling because their families prioritize everything except actual parenting. Work, money, convenience, anything but being real parents. And yes, I document it, because someone needs to advocate for these kids. The hallway had gone dead silent. Even the parents who just arrived for volunteer duty were staring in shock. Emma Williams is practically being raised by hired help, Mrs. Henderson continued, her voice rising. A teenage babysitter who thinks she knows better than trained educators. Of course she's having behavioral problems. Mrs. Williams took a step forward, and I genuinely thought she might physically attack Mrs. Henderson. But instead, she pulled out her own phone. Mr. Martinez, she said, her voice deadly calm, I assume you're recording this conversation for your incident report. The principal looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Because now there were witnesses. Lots of them. And Mrs. Henderson had just publicly admitted to everything we'd accused her of. The aftermath of Mrs. Henderson's public meltdown should have felt like victory, but standing in that hallway surrounded by shocked parents and a panicked principal, all I felt was dread. Because I knew Mrs. Henderson well enough by now to recognize the look in her eyes, she wasn't done fighting. You know what? She said, her voice shaking with rage as she pointed directly at me. Since we're being so transparent, let's talk about how this all started. This girl has been stalking me for weeks, pumping children for information, coaching them to lie about classroom incidents. My stomach dropped. Even in defeat, she was trying to drag me down with her. Maya asked Emma about her day, Mrs. Williams said icily. That's called childcare, not stalking. She organized a campaign against me. Mrs. Henderson's voice was getting shrill. She manipulated these parents into believing. We believed our own children, Jennifer interrupted. Children don't coordinate lies about homework assignments and seating charts. But Mrs. Henderson wasn't listening anymore. She was staring at me with pure venom, and I could practically see her forming one last, desperate attack. Do you know what Maya really is? She said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that somehow carried down the entire hallway. She's a 19-year-old college dropout who couldn't handle real classes, so she's playing house with someone else's family. No education degree, no child development training, no qualifications except being young and cheap. The words hit like physical blows. Because buried in her malicious spin was just enough truth to sting. I was 19, I had taken a gap year from college to figure out my major, and I didn't have formal childcare credentials beyond CPR certification. She's been filling Emma's head with ideas about mean teachers and unfair treatment, Mrs. Henderson continued, sensing weakness. A qualified caregiver would encourage respect for authority, not undermine educational professionals. I felt my face burning as murmurs started among the parents I didn't know. Mrs. Henderson was good at this, twisting facts just enough to plant seeds of doubt. And now, she said, building to her crescendo, when her obvious incompetence gets called out, she rallies other parents to attack a teacher with 12 years of experience. This is exactly the kind of chaos that happens when families prioritize convenience over their children's actual needs. The silence that followed was horrible. Because even though everyone had heard her admit to targeting students, her counterattack was working. I could see it in some of the faces around us, doubt about whether I'd manipulated the situation, whether a teenager really should have this much influence over a family's decisions. Mr. Martinez cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should all calm down, Anne. No, I said, finding my voice despite the tremor in it. She's right about one thing. I am 19, and I don't have education degrees. Mrs. Henderson's triumphant smile started to spread across her face. But I also know Emma well enough to recognize when homework problems are deliberately above grade level. I know her well enough to see the difference between normal 8-year-old behavior and a child who's being systematically broken down. And I care about her enough to fight for her even when teachers with 12 years of experience try to intimidate me into silence. I looked directly at Mrs. Henderson. You want to attack my qualifications? Fine. But your 12 years of experience just led you to publicly admit you target children based on their family structures. So maybe credentials aren't everything. The tension in the hallway was suffocating. Parents were looking between Mrs. Henderson and me like they were watching a tennis match, and I realized this confrontation had spiraled far beyond what any of us had planned. That's when Emma's voice echoed down the corridor, Maya. Why is everyone yelling? I turned to see Emma standing at the end of the hallway, her small backpack dragging behind her and confusion written all over her face. Behind her were several other children from her class, all staring wide-eyed at the crowd of adults gathered outside the principal's office. My heart shattered. Emma wasn't supposed to see this. She wasn't supposed to witness her teacher and her nanny in a screaming match about whether she was being properly cared for. Emma, sweetheart, I started, but Mrs. Henderson stepped forward with that sickeningly sweet voice she used around other adults. Good morning, Emma. Don't worry about the grown-up conversation. Why don't you head to class? But Emma wasn't moving. She was looking between Mrs. Henderson and me with those two wise 8-year-old eyes, and I could see her trying to piece together what she'd walked into. Are you fighting about me? She asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a bomb. Because that's exactly what we were doing, fighting about her, in front of half the school, turning her into the center of an adult conflict she never asked to be part of. Mrs. Henderson seized the moment with predatory precision. Emma, honey, sometimes adults have different ideas about what's best for children. But teachers and parents, real parents, usually work these things out. The emphasis on real parents was deliberate, designed to make Emma question my role in her life. And it worked. I saw confusion flicker across her face as she glanced at me. Is Maya in trouble? Emma asked, her voice getting smaller. Not trouble exactly, Mrs. Henderson said, crouching down to Emma's eye level with theatrical concern. But sometimes people who take care of you temporarily might not understand school rules the way your actual mommy and daddy do. I felt sick. She was using Emma as a weapon, right in front of everyone, manipulating an 8-year-old to score points in an adult argument. That's enough, Mrs. Williams said sharply, stepping between Mrs. Henderson and Emma. You don't get to involve my daughter in your damage control. But the damage was already done. Emma looked confused and scared, and now other children were gathering, drawn by the commotion. Tommy Chin appeared beside Emma, along with Marcus and Sarah, all the kids from Mrs. Henderson's back corner group. Mrs. Henderson, Tommy said in his quiet voice, why are all the parents here? Are we in trouble? And that's when Mrs. Henderson made her final, catastrophic mistake. Well, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy as she addressed the children, sometimes when families don't communicate properly with teachers, it creates confusion. But don't worry, the adults are going to fix the problems with your home situations. The collective intake of breath from the parents was audible. She had just told a group of 8-year-olds that their families were problems that needed fixing. Emma's face crumpled. What's wrong with our family? Mrs. Williams looked like she was about to explode, but before she could respond, Tommy started crying. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a hurt child, but the quiet, devastating tears of a kid who already thought he was somehow broken. I knew it, he whispered. I knew we were the bad kids. That's when Jennifer Chin stepped forward, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you? How dare you tell these children there's something wrong with their families? But Mrs. Henderson had gone too far to back down now. I'm simply being honest about the correlation between academic performance and home stability. You're traumatizing children. Linda Rodriguez shouted. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. The hallway erupted into chaos. Parents were shouting, children were crying, and Mr. Martinez was frantically trying to restore order while Mrs. Henderson stood in the center of it all, finally realizing she destroyed herself. But all I could see was Emma's tear-stained face, looking up at me with the devastating question, Maya, do I have a bad family? And I knew that no matter how this ended, Mrs. Henderson had just wounded something that might never fully heal. I knelt down in front of Emma, ignoring everyone else in that chaotic hallway. Her tears were breaking my heart, but I forced my voice to stay calm and steady. Emma, you have a wonderful family, I said firmly. Your parents love you so much they flew across the world just to be here for you today. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your family. But Mrs. Henderson said. Mrs. Henderson was wrong, I interrupted gently. Sometimes adults make mistakes when they're upset. But even as I comforted Emma, I could see Mrs. Henderson wasn't finished. She was watching our interaction with calculating eyes, and I realized she was about to play her final card. Maya, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, this is exactly what I've been trying to explain to the administration. You're contradicting educational authority in front of the students. This kind of undermining behavior is precisely why. Why what? Mrs. Williams cut her off, her voice dangerous. Mrs. Henderson straightened up, sensing she had an opening. Why the school district has policies about who can represent families in educational matters. Maya has been coaching these children to disrespect their teacher, organizing parents against school personnel, and now she's interfering with my professional relationship with my students. My blood ran cold as I realized what she was building toward. She was going to claim I was a disruptive influence who needed to be removed from Emma's educational life entirely. In fact, Mrs. Henderson continued, gaining confidence, I think this incident perfectly demonstrates why Emma's behavioral issues have escalated. When children receive mixed messages about authority and respect. The only person disrespecting authority here is you, Jennifer interrupted. You just told a group of 8-year-olds their families were broken. But Mrs. Henderson was back in her element now, spinning the narrative with practiced skill. I was trying to have an honest conversation about the challenges these children face when their home lives lack structure. Emma's recent behavioral deterioration coincides directly with increased dependency on temporary caregivers rather than parental guidance. She was making it sound like I was the problem, like Emma's struggles were my fault for being too involved, too supportive, too present in her life. Temporary. Mrs. Williams's voice was ice. Maya has been with our family for 8 months. She knows Emma better than some relatives. Exactly my point, Mrs. Henderson said triumphantly. This level of attachment to hired help isn't healthy for a child. Emma needs to learn appropriate boundaries between family and employees. The word employees hit like a slap. She was reducing my relationship with Emma to a business transaction, and I could see Emma's confusion deepening. At 8 years old, she didn't understand the difference between loving someone and being paid to care for them. Maya, Emma whispered, tugging on my shirt, are you just my employee? My heart shattered. No, sweetheart. I'm someone who loves you very much. But you're not family, Mrs. Henderson pressed, her voice sickeningly gentle. And Emma needs to understand that distinction for her own emotional health. That's when Mr. Martinez finally found his voice. Mrs. Henderson, this conversation is completely inappropriate in front of the children. Is it? She challenged. Or is this exactly the kind of honest discussion we should be having about blurred boundaries and confused family dynamics? Emma deserves clarity about her relationships. I watched in horror as she weaponized child psychology against an 8-year-old who was already struggling. Emma was looking between Mrs. Henderson and me with growing distress, trying to process concepts that were far too complex for her age. I don't understand, Emma said, her voice breaking. If Maya loves me, why can't she talk to my teacher? Mrs. Henderson smiled with vicious satisfaction. Because love isn't the same as authority, sweetheart. Maya cares about you, but she's not qualified to make decisions about your education or behavior. The manipulation was breathtaking. She was systematically dismantling Emma's sense of security while making it sound like concern for her well-being. And the worst part was, it was working. But then something unexpected happened. Tommy Chen, who had been crying quietly, suddenly stepped forward and looked directly at Mrs. Henderson. You're lying, he said, his voice small but surprisingly firm. Mrs. Henderson's triumphant expression faltered. Excuse me, Tommy. You're lying about Maya, he said louder, and other kids started gathering around him. Maya never told us to be mean to you. You're the one who's mean. Tommy, that's enough, Mrs. Henderson started, but Sarah joined in. Maya helped me with my reading when you said I was stupid, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. She said I was smart, not broken like you told my mommy. My heart was racing. These children were defending me, but I was terrified of what Mrs. Henderson would do to retaliate against them later. Children, you're confused, Mrs. Henderson began, but Marcus interrupted. No, we're not. You give us the hard homework to make us feel bad. Maya showed Emma the problems were too big for 2nd grade. Mrs. Henderson's face was turning red as her carefully constructed narrative crumbled in front of a dozen witnesses, dismantled by the very children she'd been targeting. That's ridiculous. These children have clearly been coached. By who? Jennifer Chin demanded. By their own experiences in your classroom. But Mrs. Henderson was spiraling now, desperate to regain control. She turned to Mr. Martinez with wild eyes. This proves my point exactly. These children are so confused about boundaries and authority that they're attacking their teacher to defend hired help. This is what happens when families prioritize convenience over proper child development. Emma was watching this with growing distress, and I could see her starting to shut down the way she did when adult conflicts got too overwhelming. Her small shoulders were hunched, and she was pulling into herself. Mrs. Williams noticed too. "That's enough," she said firmly, moving protectively toward Emma. "Mr. Martinez, I want Mrs. Henderson removed from my daughter's vicinity immediately." "You can't remove me," Mrs. Henderson snapped. "I'm her teacher. I have educational authority over." "You have no authority over anyone anymore," a new voice interrupted. Everyone turned to see a stern-looking woman in a business suit walking down the hallway with two other adults I didn't recognize. Mr. Martinez's face went pale. "Dr. Thompson?" "I wasn't expecting." Clearly, the woman said dryly. "I'm Dr. Sarah Thompson, District Superintendent. We received several urgent calls this weekend about incidents at this school, and frankly, what I'm witnessing right now is beyond concerning." Mrs. Henderson's defiance crumbled. "Dr. Thompson, I can explain. You just publicly berated children about their family structures, told an 8-year-old her family was broken, and admitted to targeting students based on your personal prejudices," Dr. Thompson said coldly. "In front of multiple witnesses. There's nothing to explain." The hallway had gone dead silent except for a few sniffles from the younger kids. Mrs. Henderson looked around desperately, as if searching for allies, but found only disgusted faces. "Furthermore," Dr. Thompson continued, "we've spent the weekend reviewing complaints about your classroom management, and several patterns have emerged that require immediate investigation." Mrs. Henderson's face went white. "What patterns?" "Discriminatory grading practices, inappropriate homework assignments, systematic targeting of students from non-traditional families, and now public harassment of both students and their caregivers." I felt a surge of vindication mixed with terror. This was really happening. Mrs. Henderson was being held accountable. But I could see the rage building in her eyes, and I knew she was about to lash out one final time. "Fine," she exploded. "But don't come crying to me when these damaged children continue failing because their families can't provide proper support. Some of us still believe in educational standards." Dr. Thompson's expression turned glacial. "Mrs. Henderson, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the premises immediately." The security officers arrived within minutes, and watching Mrs. Henderson being escorted from the building should have felt triumphant. Instead, I was focused entirely on Emma, who had gone completely quiet and was clinging to her mother's hand with white knuckles. Dr. Thompson knelt down to address the children who had witnessed everything. "I want all of you to know that what just happened was not your fault, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with any of your families. Sometimes adults make very poor choices, and that's what happened here." Emma looked up at her with those big, worried eyes. "Are we really the bad kids?" "You are wonderful kids," Dr. Thompson said firmly. "And you're going to have a much better rest of the school year, I promise." As the crowd began to disperse and parents took their children to class, Mrs. Williams pulled me aside. "Maya, I owe you an enormous apology." "For what?" "For not seeing this sooner. For putting you in a position where you had to fight this battle alone." Her voice was thick with emotion. "You protected our daughter when we weren't here to do it ourselves." I felt tears starting. I was so scared I was making everything worse for her. "You saved her," Mr. Williams said, joining us. "God knows how long this would have continued if you hadn't stood up to that woman." Dr. Thompson approached us as the hallway finally emptied. "Ms. Maya, I understand you were the first to raise concerns about Mrs. Henderson's classroom practices." I nodded nervously. I just knew something was wrong when Emma started having nightmares about school. "Your advocacy may have prevented serious psychological damage to several children. We'll be conducting a thorough review of Mrs. Henderson's tenure, and I suspect we'll find this pattern goes back years." "What happens now?" Mrs. Williams asked. "Mrs. Henderson will be terminated. The children will be transitioned to substitute teachers immediately, and we'll bring in counselors to help them process what they've experienced. As for you, Ms. Maya," she turned to me, "I hope you'll consider education as a career path. You have excellent instincts for child advocacy." 3 months later, Emma bounced into our kitchen with a perfect spelling test and a huge smile. "Maya. Look." Mrs. Rodriguez said my handwriting is beautiful again. The difference in her was night and day. The nightmares had stopped within weeks of Mrs. Henderson's removal. Her confidence was rebuilding, and she was actually excited about school again. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," I said, hanging her test on the refrigerator next to dozens of others. "Maya," Emma said, settling down with her afternoon snack. "Remember when Mrs. Henderson said you weren't really family?" My heart clenched. I remember. She was wrong about that too, wasn't she? I looked at this amazing little girl who had taught me more about love and courage than any textbook ever could. "Yeah, Em. She was wrong about that too." "Good," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Because you're definitely my family. Even if you do get paid to love me." I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "I don't get paid to love you, silly. I get paid to take care of you. The love part is completely free." Later that evening, I got a text from Jennifer. "Tommy got Student of the Month. His new teacher says he's thriving. Thank you for starting this fight, Maya." I smiled, watching Emma help her dad with dinner while chattering about her day. Sometimes standing up for what's right means risking everything. But sometimes, when you're fighting for someone you love, everything is worth the risk. Mrs. Henderson had called me just a babysitter. She was wrong about that, just like she was wrong about everything else. I wasn't just anything. I was Emma's fierce protector, her advocate, and her family. And that was more than enough.